Namaskar. Uh, I would like to thank the entire TEDx team for giving me this opportunity to share whatever I've learned so far. And I'd like to extend my gratitude to all of them and to all of you to very kindly come here. I'm an architect, and me, with my wife and my partner, we were looking at our profession when we started our journey into it in 1991. And at that time, we were not very comfortable about the way the usual architecture profession works. But we did not even know how to go about further. And we just stumbled on an opportunity later in 1994 and 1998, where we could see how we could really create value in what we do. And I'm going to share not the journey, but what really it can do. So I'm going to share with you today about a concept called building as learning aid, which is in fact reaching out to more than 1 lakh schools across 19 states and union territories of this country. It is also now reaching out to Anganwadis in different states across the country. So basically, what is very important, and one of the questions I thought before coming here was to ask ourselves as youth, what value creation are we doing? And where are we going to do this value creation? And for whom? And how? And when? I think it is very important to define this in a very sketchy way, maybe in the beginning, not necessarily in a very perfect way in the beginning, because there is no perfect way. And it's also important to ponder over these questions as we go around. So I'm going to share now about this concept of building as learning aid, which is about looking at the space as a resource. It is about looking at everything that you are touching, feeling at this point of time, and I can make connections with several other speakers who spoke a while ago, where how we can use every small detail around us in the physical space as a resource for learning for children. Essentially, the chair on which you are sitting, the floor, the wall, the ceiling, the light, the stage, the carpet, the steps, the railing, everything can become a learning situation for a child. And that's what we felt, because we could see very well across the country there's a huge number of existing resources that you already have. If you look at the schools around, and I'm not talking about a school like this where I'm standing right now, I'm talking about lakhs of schools across the country in the rural areas where they may not have some of the basics in terms of the very environment which is so important for learning. So you could have dead backyards, you could have broken floors, you could have all kinds of situations where our children are expected to come and learn. I'm talking about a larger number of children who go there. There could be overcrowded classrooms like in Bihar, UP and West Bengal, or there could be classrooms which have very little number of children like in Uttarakhand, like in many of the other hilly states. You could even have things which are not really designed for them, but they are expected to use them, and so on. Because very often they are designed by the adult's perspective. You could even have schools which don't have any kind of a territory or a boundary, and you have caged windows which are like jails for our kids, and that's where we expect our kids to come. Now the point is, as architects, we are all trained to make new buildings, but what do we do with this huge existing built resource that is already there? And that was the question that really was haunting us for a long while. But we can't do anything in isolation unless we connect with the larger goals of education that we have defined for ourselves in this country, which are, first is access of education to all children. Retaining the child in the school system. The point is, if the school system is worth it, then of course we should retain. The third is equity, and we have been hearing about this, listening about what people have done in the same podium. And of course, quality, which overarches all these. And it's very important that whatever we try to do in the physical environment in any way, it has to connect to these goals. Going further on this, I would like to say that it's very important that when we are looking at the space and the elements that constitute that space, can we look at it differently? Can we tinker it a little bit? This is a visual from Bastar, an Anganwadi in Bastar in Chhattisgarh's state, where the window grills, the same cage, has been modified to become a learning resource. It's not just a toy, it is also something which allows children to have dexterity in their hand. It also allows them to imagine and make stories and things like that. So BaLA is really about looking at the uniqueness of the three-dimensional space and what it can do for kids. And we have this space in abundance around us at any point of time, anywhere. It is not really dependent on what kind of fund actually go into it. It is really about our mindset to look at space differently. So you could have, these are examples from Jammu Kashmir and Karnataka government schools, where a door angle protector is made right there. And children can immediately see how the concept of angle comes out of their textbook and really comes into the real world. You could have various other things, but let us see how we can add value in simple ways. Like for instance, this change that you see here on the left and the right. Bringing down the chalkboard, it becomes more democratic, it becomes more inclusive in so many different ways. It becomes more exciting. These are all most examples from government schools that I'm sharing with you. It is also about looking at various other things like furniture and how children communicate with each other, how do they learn from each other, and so on. Can we make it more sensitive, more child-friendly in so many different ways? Look at their natural behavior and address it in a meaningful way. It is also about making use of what is already there, giving it a layer of something which is more useful from a child's perspective. What you see here are examples of that, where the floors could be repaired in a more innovative manner so that they become more meaningful in the learning process. You could even look at the trees and the plants in a way that they become more meaningful from a child's perspective. We can even look at the outdoor spaces and create a lot of scope using frugal resources. And in fact, what we really need is frugal innovation in many of these. So can we make playgrounds, for instance, which allow children not just physical development, but creative development, aesthetic development, cognitive, social, emotional, and so on? And it's possible, and that has been happening. Let me show you this text, and I give you about 10 seconds to remember what is written there. 10 seconds, your time starts now. Okay, we move on. And now I give you only 3 seconds to remember what is there. It's the same thing, same text, same letters, same font. But the point is, very often we as adults forget what is meaningful from the child's perspective. We put it exactly as Michael Foucault said about those prisons. You know, we actually put them in those jails, we put them in those boxes, we fix them, and so on. So it's very important that we make these experiences for a child more meaningful. And if we reflect in our own childhood, that we did not learn everything inside the classroom. We actually learned it across. We still learn. We continue to learn everywhere. We go to the market. We ride on a bicycle. We take a road. We talk to somebody. We fall. Whatever. They are all learning situations. Now, can we equip our environment with so many possibilities of learning opportunities through a very subtle tinkering of those spaces? That's the core idea. So it happens at 2 levels, and those 2 levels are creating settings for physical, for playful teaching learning experiences for the kids, and to develop teaching learning resources around them. Essentially, you develop spaces. I'm focusing on the how part because very often the idea could be fine, but how do you do it is so critical. So that's where we are. So you can imagine, for instance, a terrace of a school And you could have this as a larger space, but then it could have several settings. For instance, in this hall, I am standing on one setting. There are people who are controlling the entire technique behind it from that setting. You are sitting there in one setting, second setting, third, fourth, so many settings. A larger space could have multiple settings, and these settings could further have learning resources for children to engage. And these could be developed in a very simple, frugal way. And then, because the learning happens all the time and it happens everywhere, scatter them all over. Why restrict them in the classroom? Why can't they be on the staircase, on the outdoor, under the tree, on the boundary wall, at the gate, in the path, in the garden, wherever? So you scatter them all over so that the learning can take place in so many different ways. And it allows not just one kind of learning. It is about cognitive, physical, social, emotional, aesthetical, everything. So you create these settings, and that exactly is what we try to do. And we try to create in the spaces multiple use settings, multiple use resources which children can use in so many different ways to play. It need not be very specific to certain age. It can also be specific to certain age sometimes, but it can also be open-ended for all kinds of usage. These are all examples from government schools in different parts of the country, where you could have measuring scales, you could have furniture. For instance, simple thing like estimating the weight. Why can't we simply write the weight of a table, weight of a chair on that? Children across the world throw furniture around. Let them estimate what it is. Let them know what it is, and so on. You could even use the tracing part, the tracing map. I mean, you can use you don't have, for a large number of schools, any kind of stationery shop. They don't have electricity, they don't have photocopying machines and so on. How do you duplicate resources there? And there are simple ways to do that, and those are the ones which we can equip our schools with. You could even have a map. Mapping is something that children don't fully understand very well, very often. And it's possible to do that in outdoors in so many different ways. This is a map of India outside the Gir forest in a school where a geography class is currently happening. Children learn about how to make mountains, how to make plateaus, how to make rivers. Right here. They can play with sand, it's free space. They can also learn latitude, longitude in the real world. The map is oriented exactly due north, the way it should be. I'll just show you very quickly a transformation of a school, of how it was and how it became later. I'll not go into the details because of the time, but it will quickly give you an idea of this is how the school was in 2007, and this is what it became later. Let me tell you, our work is not about doing it ourselves. It is really about empowering people to do it on their own. This entire work has been done by a school headmaster, the community, the government engineers, and other administrators. So it got transformed from this to that. As you can see, a lot of greenery, a lot of things started coming in. All we did was to train them, orient them, equip them with ideas and whatever technical stuff that they wanted. But then, thereafter, it was their own thing. So there's a lot of ownership in what has been done. And there are many states which have really taken it up in a very comprehensive way, in a very serious way, while investing their resources in developing the school environments. These are the various things which have happened across the outdoor spaces, the corridors, the classrooms. All these spaces got transformed. And a lot of thinking in small details have gone into it. And that is what we are trying to do in developing that kind of a culture amongst the school teachers, headmasters, and others. The classrooms. And these are all about tinkering as you are modifying, adjusting, augmenting, and so on. So earlier, it was a school which had very little number of resources for BaLA, but now it has so many settings which have been created across the entire environment. I'm getting a slight delay in the visual. And there were a lot of spaces which were as you can see, there are very few favorite spaces across these, which actually increased because the children were very much part of planning, and the process of designing everything involved them at so many different ways. As a result of that, children started coming to school hours, and this is happening in several states now, where children come to schools before school hours, where you have these resources available to them, and they are there for after the school hours, even the recess hours, which is when many children after the midday meal would go off, they would continue to be there. Essentially what I'm just trying to communicate here is that those goals I was talking about, there has been a decrease in absenteeism, there has been a lot of demand from the children to be sent to the school rather than the other way around. There have been instances of self and peer group learning which have increased significantly in these environments rather than the rote learning mode which usually government schools offer. The spaces are very much more optimally used, and the use efficiency ratio has also increased very significantly across the school spaces. The best part of it, which is the last one, which is that it has unleashed the creative potential of everybody who is part of the system. It is not just about we doing it, it is about they doing it, and with the full ownership of that. What I would like to say finally is that we can go beyond the idea of shelter when we are looking at architecture. We can go beyond this and create more meaningful spaces and settings for learning. And this is exactly where I would like to say it's very important to be innovative and creative and to let others also bring in their creativity. We are a huge nation, and it is very important that we find ways to deal with that. Just few facts before I end, that we are in a country which has about 640,000 habitations. We're talking about nearly 13.6 lakh elementary schools, which includes the primary schools, where about 19.7 crore children study. We're talking about 87% schools which are still in the rural areas and only 13% in the urban areas. And about 75% children still study in the government schools, only 25% come to some kind of a private school. Now it's very important to think about, whenever we are doing anything, about these many children. Now let us look at some other figures. We are talking about something like 23.4 crore youth in our country at present. Essentially, it's very important that as youth, what is the way forward we are looking for? And now we go back to those questions. What value creation? For whom? Where? How? And so on. So I leave you with this small question here. What would be our currency? Money or value creation? Thank you.